Hey, do you have comments about communism? Let's take an opportunity to talk about East versus West Germany, 1949 to 1990. East Germany, also known as the German Democratic Republic, was initially occupied by the USSR, and slowly, over the course of a few decades, the industries became more and more nationalized. And then Western Germany, initially occupied by the Western Allies, known as the Federal Republic of Germany. Roughly speaking, capitalist versus communist. And by 1980, the results started to become quite clear. In 1950, both West and East Germany had the same GDP per capita, but 30 years later, West Germany was far outgrowing the East. In fact, a few decades later, the gap remained quite big. Now, GDP per capita doesn't measure everything about the material quality of life. If we look at life expectancy, there also was a gap between East and West, but the good news is by now, it's mostly converged. We can also look at specific consumer durables. By 1989, 96% of West Germans had a private car, whereas only 54% of East Germans did. Both had TV sets, but only 57% of East German TV sets were in color. While nearly everybody in the West had a telephone, in East Germany only 17% did. 43% had freezers in East Germany compared to 75%. West Germany had more modern housing, more likely had units with a bath and shower, as well as more living space per person. One of the appropriate main concerns with unfettered capitalism is the treatment of the environment. In the 1970s, all across the capitalist world, from the United States to Japan to West Germany, started passing more strict environmental regulation, and by the 1980s, we started seeing some significant improvements. Sulfur emissions in East Germany were multiple times higher than what we saw in West. Nitrous oxide emissions per person were much higher. This is really interesting because the West had more cars per person. The emissions per vehicle were significantly lower. Another reason is that East Germany relied on lignite coal for the majority of their electricity. This is dirty coal. This is pretty nasty stuff. Because West Germany was richer, they were spending more Deutschmarks per capita on environmental protection, well over 300 Deutschmarks compared to just over 100 in East Germany. But beyond these metrics of quality of life, people voted with their feet. Before the construction of the Berlin Wall, 3.5 million East Germans migrated to the West. And then after they built it, they had to guard it, and over 100 East Germans lost their lives trying to flee and escape. If you have to build a prison to hold people in, it's probably not a superior economic system. And now we get to the nuance. How much of this was caused by the capitalism versus socialism debate? This paper is a really great recent discussion, rethinking a natural experiment interpretation of the enduring effects of communism. Social science is really difficult, especially on these big, grand economic systems debate. We don't have really good treatment and control groups. And the paper points out that the differences between East and West Germany were a whole lot more than just the imposition of the USSR-style communism in 1945. Number one, immediately after the war, Russia hauled away literal factories worth of equipment back to Russia, stripping and extracting resources from East Germany. In contrast, Western Germany experienced an influx of investment from the West trying to build up the Western economy. Another issue is that the Berlin Wall wasn't built until 1961. There was a lot of flow from both sides, although a lot more were going to the West. People weren't migrating randomly, which is what we would need for a natural experiment, but rather they had pre-existing ideological and political preferences. It's more than that. There were many political and economic differences between East and West Germany before the Second World War. This map comes from 1925. It shows that East Germany had a higher share of working class, as well as a lower share of self-employed. When we think of one of the advantages of capitalism, it is the entrepreneurship, the innovation, the creation, and self-employment is helpful for that. These differences already existed. It had nothing to do with Stalin. Culturally, there's differences. Church attendance was lower in East Germany in the 1910s. Protestantism was a higher share in 1925. So in conclusion, it didn't work out for East Germany. How much of this was the fault of nationalization or of other imposed communist policies? Some of it, but not all of it. Clean scientific experiments at the national, multi-generational scale are just impossible to do.